Everybody asks this all the time. What's the best tool? What's the best tool? There's not the best tool. Even with Zoom Info, there's going to be bad. There's going to be workable. There's going to be reachable. And even in reachable, there's going to be bad.
At this point, you're going from your targets, accounts, and contacts to now having a workable list. We're going to do something special today. In this episode of Outbound Fluff, No Sales, we're actually going to break down the full 7-step system that we deploy for our clients, the Outbound engine. If you follow all 7 of these steps, you are going to have the same ingredients that allow our clients to have 1 or 2 reps in a system that puts out revenue like a team of 20. If you have questions about this along the way, you want clarification, or you just want to see what it looks like under the hood, don't hesitate to reach out to us. This one, we're going to break down the 7-step process for building your outbound engine.
Yeah,
All right.
My 7 completions for the day just shot my throat.
If you can't hear it, I apologize in advance. Ryan, it's going to sound like a smoker this entire episode.
I'm a smoker. I'm a
toker. Joker.
I'm a
He's a midnight cold caller.
Poker.
Don't cold call midnight. I did that once. It's very embarrassing. Welcome back to another edition.
It depends
of
on where you're
Outbound
at.
Fluff.
You could call at midnight into Australia. From here.
It's true. That's true. This edition of Outbound Fluff, No Sales, is going to be a unique one. After doing this like 30 times in the last 2-3 months on discovery calls with our prospects, I'm like, let's just make a video about it. I don't want to keep repeating myself. And so what we're going to do today is actually break down the entire 7-step guide for knowing what you have to do operationally next to get outbound up and running. Phone first outbound. You are going to walk away with 7 steps. You're going to be at a different step depending on where you are in your business. If you're watching this, you're a business owner, head of sales team, or you just want to improve your outbound process, these are going to be the prescriptive steps that we recommend you take. So let's dive into it. And without any further ado, let's start with step 1. So very first thing you have to do is understanding your market. Ryan is really fond of saying target accounts, we sell to people. So we got to start with targeting accounts. This is the most beginner stage. If you're brand new to this, this is often the thing where people hit their first wall. What makes a good account? So this is going to depend. Ryan and I were just chatting a moment ago about this. It's going to depend on your business and what is an ideal customer. So some recommendations is to come up with a ICP, an ideal customer profile avatar, a description of what a good customer by the account level actually looks like for you. So some businesses, if you're in the B2B software world, might require everyone to use a certain tool because your business makes that more efficient. Maybe you're a local business and you can only sell in a certain region, or maybe you don't have either of those constraints and you have a large addressable market. So depending on these details, there's going to be certain recommendations about what you should and should not do. But to start, the very first thing you want to clearly identify is what has to be true for an account to look like a really good account for me. So Ryan, any recommendations for this piece of what makes a really great account that you would advise someone who is relatively new at this part?
Well, again, it depends. So you have to understand the types of companies that you're going after. And again, the basic way of targeting companies is going to be based on what they call firmographics, which is like industry, geography, size. That's kind of basic firmographics, right?
And size can be employee count, it could be revenue, but
and revenue is hard to find for small private companies, even big private companies. And so revenue is a really hard target if you go into these databases that sell that. So usually you want to use employee count as a proxy, as a good estimator for revenue, although it's also not the case in certain industries, right? There's software companies that do hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue with a small employee count, but that's why it depends. So you have to be very clear with the types of companies that you want to do business with. And to Ronen's point, usually I like to call it the beachhead strategy. Most people who are building a business likely, and they're trying to start getting more customers, they probably have a few customers. So a beachhead strategy is a lookalike. You have a core client and you look at the firmographics of the people you're already doing business with. What industry are they in? What's the size of that company? Where are they located? To your point, the technologies that they use or you integrate with, that's called technographics. That's another thing you could look at, but you're going to build out the information that you're seeking when you look for another company based on these pieces of information. It's very difficult to give this as a generic idea because you have to sit down and think about that, right? If you
Yes.
really want to take it one step further, you should start looking at not just the industry, size, location, but also the sophistication, the type of business they are. There's so much there. Like if you're going to build an outbound program, you have to know these things so that you can have your hypothesis for understanding the types of companies you want to go after. If you already have a group of clients that you're working with and you're starting to build this lookalike, there are tools you can look into that help with this, right? One that we're exploring right now is a company called GetRev. Pretty cool little technology. I can't speak to the quality of it just yet, but we're going to start testing it. Could be like a shortcut to this. So GetRev looks really interesting. They have something they call exographics, which layers in all this stuff. It's really cool. If you're balling on a budget, there's kind of free tools you could use for this. SimilarWeb, right? If
With is another one for technographics.
Technographics, right? And then again, you could always go to some of these other databases that exist, Rocket, Reach, Apollo. These are cheap tools you can get a couple grand to get access to, and they have all of these firmographics that you can sort and filter on to uh, get an initial count list built. In this day and age, this is all kind of public data. There's digital footprints. I would put in the information in probably into like ChatGPT or Grok or something like that, and that would probably build a list, right, for a local market. So you can use tools that help you get these signals. The important thing is, and again, this is depending on who you're selling to, is because this other one might not have websites, right? They were going to like web warehouses, but if they have a website and a digital footprint, there's a good chance you can get information that's going to help you identify if they're in your swim lane, right? That's the firmographics, technographics signals you're using to identify them as a company that you believe you want to be doing business with.
There is a masterclass inside of the masterclass. The takeaway in terms of outcomes should be a lot of clarity on the actual workable size of your market. Like, how many accounts have I now just come up with that I would love to be in a sales conversation with? As you go from a beginner to intermediate to advanced, you may even start to tier this out: good, better, best. And that way you could start with your best and work your way backwards. And to recap the part that's really important with 3 really clear examples. If I have a hyper local business, maybe Google Maps is my best friend. If I, for example, selling to warehouses in San Diego, if I have a technical requirement for all of my buyers, like they all have to be using NetSuite, having a good technographic tool that tells me all the potential NetSuite users would be a requirement. Usually there are industry specific databases, and that's going to be a great place to also start. One other example that I used to use years ago was one called GovSpend. If you sell to SLED, that tends to be a good starting point if you know that that has to be true. So the more criteria you have about the accounts, starting place is figure out what exists by way of a database that has that same criteria for me, that specializes in that. The fewer criteria you have, usually the much wider addressable market you'll have. So
Yeah.
that should get you to your output of your, essentially your account universe. Well, let's roll into step 2. So let's say I have my list of accounts. We target accounts, we sell to people. Love it or hate it, the best database of people working at companies in the B2B world is LinkedIn. They have essentially cornered that market because people use it as a social media platform. They'll update their job status. Nothing in this world of databases is ever 100% accurate, but it is probably by far and away still the best for most companies to go to LinkedIn. When you're moving now from the accounts where you were looking for things like firmographic, technographics, and other details that tell you this company is a company we probably want to talk to, things start to shift when you go to people, because people have problems. People experience pain, not companies. So the question and the challenge becomes, how do I find the people who have the relevant challenge that I solve for and would be hopefully open to a conversation now or in the future about that? Where this gets challenging is that titles are kind of meaningless. At one company, a VP of sales is going to be someone with a department of 40 sellers under them. At another company, a VP of sales is a seller who just has a quota and a territory and has to close deals. We have literally seen that with one of our clients. Because of this difference from company to company, there is no magic bullet here with we sell to everyone who's a VP of sales, because what it really comes down to is what do they do every day at that company, and does their job, their goals that they have, include the kind of pains and challenges that we can solve for.
Well, the way to think about it is jobs to be done, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and again, assuming once you have your accounts, that company is on LinkedIn, then the majority of the senior leadership for that company is probably on LinkedIn. It's not always the case. For smaller companies, they might have them on their website listed, on the About Me page. It's not as common as it used to be 10 years ago, but companies still build out their core team on their websites as well. But you want to be going after the job to be done within the organization, and you want to be going after the person or people whose role is to get the job done. Every company doesn't have problems. They have people, and people within those organizations are solving the problems that are necessary to get work done. So you want to be able to identify the types of things that somebody will be responsible for. And it always rolls up to some sort of senior leader within an organization. Always. For small businesses, it might go all the way just to like the one executive, but every company who's probably worth doing business with is going to have someone at that company whose core responsibility is to get the job done. That's who you're looking to go after. And you have to have a clear definition of that. And sometimes it does map to titles, but to your point, in today's world, titles are not the way to do it. You got to look at the types of work that people are doing. And so to look at the difference between a VP of sales who's likely running a team and a VP of sales who is probably an individual contributor, if you're using LinkedIn, is to look at their trajectory. What roles did they have in the past before they had that role? How long were they in them? And then ultimately, are they describing themselves? More often than not, the actual sales leader does a pretty good job of explaining their past, their performance, they're a team leader, they're a builder, they do these things. A lot of the actual sales leaders will do that. Not all of them, but a lot of them will. And that's an easy differentiator from somebody who was like account executive, a VP, right? They didn't have like a director role before going to a VP or something of that nature. Again, not a perfect science.
Yeah.
For larger companies.
And so the takeaway with that is like, try to use your common sense. But the thing that's similar with this step, as with the previous step, is that usually nothing will beat your own brain. Your ability to actually look at this is going to be the highest quality version to deciding right account, right contact, which is exactly why when companies start by trying to outsource it, they immediately get into hot water with quality. Wrong accounts, bad fit accounts, wrong contacts, because to outsource the most important decision, your list and who you put on the list, without really tight like frameworks or guides that are similar to what you already know as a founder, business owner, team leader, or even a sales rep who's done this over and over again, is just setting someone else up for failure. The other reason this fails is similar to that, is maybe I'm not outsourcing it to a VA, but maybe I'm outsourcing it to technology like AI. And again, if it's not going to be super well refined and then double checked, there's going to be a high false positive rate on that. And this is where Ryan and I have seen time and time again, the companies that do get this right have a quality control element in there, or something that has become so crystallized as part of like, this is how they know exactly who the right accounts are and the right people, even if it does eventually get to a point where they're able to do it more rapidly, not necessarily one by one. But if you're just starting out, nothing beats doing it one by one.
No, I mean, you're going to get so much more outcomes when you're focused on the actual right people. I would rather have a list of 100 perfect companies, 100 perfect contacts, knowing that I can only get 20 conversations from that list in the first place, knowing that those 20 are the actual people I want to talk to, than a
Yeah.
thousand random contacts with 200 that are all over the place. Once you get a groove for how to find these things, there's ways to create some automations. It's those kind of rules that you could feed
Mhm.
to an AI. These days, VAs are really good once you've actually defined exactly what you're looking for.
You're going to have to
If you've
guide them.
done,
You're going to have to train and really work with them and give them what you know so that they have the tribal knowledge. And that's the word for it. It's transference of that tribal knowledge of what makes a great account and a great contact. And when you're done with this step, your output will be a list of target accounts with people at those accounts that we want to be in a sales conversation with. This is all preliminary work. You haven't even started doing marketing or sales at this point or any kind of outreach, but this is required in order to move into that next phase. Now, that's the end of step 2. But step 3 is one that often gets all the attention, at least on LinkedIn from salespeople, which is enriching the contacts with phone numbers, emails, LinkedIn links, the way you're going to contact the contacts. And the funny thing about this, in a lot of ways, this is the least complex step or the simplest one. And it, in my opinion, is way overhyped and over talked about because people often miss step 4, which is about to come after this, thinking that this is the end all be all, which is the quality of the data. Did I get a quality phone number? Did I get a high quality email? Getting this stuff is just kind of like you gotta just pick a database, whatever your budget is. If you're balling on a dime, like there are low cost ones, don't expect a lot from the coverage. If I had 1,000 contacts, I might only get 600 with a phone number. Of those 600 with a phone number, maybe 100 of those are just straight up wrong phone numbers, bad. You're going to find huge variance. But to this day, I don't think we've ever seen a single data provider that has exceptional coverage and quality. They all kind of suck at different amounts.
yeah,
But that said, it still seems like of all of them that are out there in the B2B world, ZoomInfo is still the best overall in terms of quality and the amount of data that they do have. The next step is to go from a workable list to identifying your reachable list. A really good way to describe this is it's contact validation. To validate a channel, phone, email, LinkedIn, I need to determine a yes, no answer to a simple question. Can I reach this person on this channel? Some people are reachable on LinkedIn, email, and phone. Like they may answer their phone, they may reply to all emails, and they may be active on LinkedIn. Other people are not reachable on any channel. As a sales rep, a cold caller, a marketer, you don't know what that is until you start doing the work. The problem is most companies will have their reps who they're paying a salary to with a stated hourly rate to go do that work. We use TitanX. TitanX is Ryan's company that he built. It used to be called Phone Ready Leads. We're one of their premier partners.
well,
Because
Tinex is not my company. I sold my company. Yeah,
did I not say that?
yeah.
Sorry.
You said it was my company.
Ryan built and sold it. We don't have any equity anymore in it, unfortunately, but we do have personal interest in seeing their success. Also, it's a big piece of the engine we build, the Outbound engine. This is the fuel of the engine, effectively, or one of the, I guess, one of the blends of the fuel, if you want to look at it that way. To validate the channel, the phone, it means you are going to predetermine who picks up the phone before your expensive sales rep makes the call. Average dials made by an SDR is 44 a day. Average SDR is also on about an $80,000 a year on target earnings, which means with benefits and tax, they're costing your business about $100,000 a year in the US. That means every time they make one of those 44 dials, you're probably going to spend somewhere between $9 to $10 for that phone number to be dialed. So let that sink in for a second. Before you go work the workable list, get it validated to see who's even reachable. That will now upgrade your workable list to a reachable list. Now, at this point, you could go make calls and you will have a pretty high connect rate if you start to work the reachable data, you start to call the reachable data from the list. But we have a step in between the calls that is probably right for most, maybe all, companies that are going to use outbound consistently. And that is making sure that your phone system is first set up right. And this is a step, again, that a lot of people won't think about. They'll just default to whatever tools they have access to, maybe even cell phones, their own phone. But the dialer has an impact because in today's day and age, if you're selling into the US market, there are 3 companies that dominate the phones: Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. And all 3 of them have very sophisticated and increasingly more aggressive spam filters. Just like Google and Microsoft have done now with email. Google recently blew that up, actually. But just like they've done with email, they don't want their customers getting spam emails. Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile don't want their customers getting a bunch of unsolicited phone calls. So they've gotten extremely clever with sharp algorithms that identify signals of people who are sellers. If you do not get the system set up right, you are dramatically increasing your odds of your phone number showing up with a caller ID that's a spam, likely junk, all these other things.
Telemarketer.
Sometimes I just get telemark with a question mark also now. And you won't know if I can get through to Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T. All of them have slightly different algorithms. And I believe they're actually state-based too. This is why we always prefer using front spin as our dialer. It's not perfect. There is no perfect dial. There's no perfect way to never show up as spam, but they beat everyone out. And that's on the tech side. On the actual activity side, when we think about the system, we want to make sure that basic functionality is in place outside of the phone number and caller ID working and not showing up as spam, but to document what is happening on the call. Now this is just a touch of like RevOps and systems. You want to make sure you have a good way to disposition the outcome of the call, take notes, set a follow-up date, and a priority. And this is a plug for Ryan's book that he wrote, Outbound Sales, No Fluff, unlike our show, Outbound Fluff, No Sales, where he describes exactly what those bucket stages are. This takes you now finally out of step 5 into step 6, where it's time to make the calls. And the rest of these steps, 6 and 7, are the things that most SDRs, sales reps, and folks making cold calling for outbound, doing cold calls for outbound, this is what most of your brain energy is thinking about, is what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And what is important here? So let's take you into step 6, executing the calls. Now, this is the primary job of a sales rep: revenue generating activity. Finally, with all this stuff in place, those activities can be revenue generating. However, there's a pretty big paradigm shift that might have to happen first, which is just accepting the reality of what outbound is and is not. Most people who've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, Boiler Room, all these other movies, maybe Glengarry Glen Ross, think that just like in Hollywood, like Leo depicted in Wolf of Wall Street, I can have these magical words that will convince somebody to spend $100,000 on my software who had no intention of doing so. I don't know if we live in the same world, but that is not true today in 2026, and it hasn't been for quite some time. The buying process for most companies these days has increased in complexity, in decision makers, and often it is not done in one call. There might be some exceptions here to this. Goal of a call now that I have my list of reachable prospects is to reach them and have a completed conversation. Now, there's a key element to this completed conversation, which is very similar to something else that you might know. That is an ad. An ad, which is a marketing tool to do outbound, is I'm going to deliver a message to people I believe could be buyers. Sounds a lot like a cold call. I'm going to deliver a message to people I believe that could be buyers. I don't know whether or not that's actually true. The way we think about scripting, the cold call at the operators, and then the way we set it all up to support this is it is a conversational ad. You're essentially trying to deliver a consistent message to everyone on your list. Now, if you're a company of multiple product lines, multiple personas, you can have different lists with different scripts. That's fine. But the key is you want to deliver the same message consistently. That'll help you see what's working, what's not working, and most importantly, you'll understand where your market lies in terms of their readiness. The final piece of this puzzle comes from Chet Holmes' 2008 book, Outbound Sales Machine, where he describes the buyer's pyramid.
Ultimate sales machine.
Ultimate sales machine, thank you. In the pyramid, if you haven't seen this image before, Google it. Maybe we'll drop it here real quickly, but only 2 to 3% of your market is typically actively buying what you sell. Including that, about the top 10% of your market is open to what you do. You put that into play here with Outbound. What Chet says is, sure, let's go all compete for that like your competitors are doing as well for that top 10% of the market. But what Chet also says is go educate the next 30%. They're not ready now. Because if you educate that group, you have a conversation with them, you stay in touch and have another one, you stay in touch and have another one, when they do come ready, because people move up and down in the pyramid, they'll be ready thinking about you. You're going to come first in their mind because you've already engaged with them. Our job is to identify where is the prospect in the pyramid. If it's a not now, we need to know when. If it's a not never, we need to know why. If it's a not me, we want to try to figure out then who. When you've eliminated the need for a rep to build their own list because you now understand how important that is and strategic and you're doing it for them. They're not emailing, they're not doing LinkedIn either. They should have enough time in the day to make 150 to 180 dials. That changes the game because the average rep is only going to do 40 to 50. So even just the volume, and if you followed all the steps to this point, it's not just volume for the sake of volume. It's going to be volume with a high connect rate, which means that if you're doing about 150 dials, that can often lead to about 30 connects consistently, scalably, over 12 months. It's not just a flash in the pan where it happens once. That's the coolest thing that when we see this working for our clients, month 3 to 6, 6 to 9, is that it maintains over 12 months at the same rate, and that is truly scalable outbound. Now, there's one final step here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, but we'll do this one really quickly. The last and final step is follow-up. We'll summarize it with a one-liner, which is there's fat stacks in the circle backs. More often than not, your first conversation with a prospect is not the one that will have them ready to move forward. As long as your system is set up in a way where you can identify what happened, set up your follow-up date, and that comes to you, not you have to go to it and find it, but you have a system that reminds you it's time, go make that next call. In the follow-up call, you will see a much higher conversion rate in that next conversation to they're now ready. That's because over time, people's priorities changes, things happen. As long as you continue to stay in front of them, you're going to capture the benefit of follow-up, which is the main thing that allows outbound to compound. That I can create a follow-up list that should grow. And as I do the work on that follow-up list, it will convert at a 1.5 to up to maybe even 3 times higher conversion rate than a net new conversation the first time I reach a prospect. So step 7 is simple. In order to get the most value out of outbound, don't forget the follow-up and don't forget to do it on time, but rather consistently. You follow these 7 steps, you will have a hell of an engine that can run outbound consistently for you, generate the right amount of revenue, and most importantly, allow you to truly dominate your market. Being able to speak with all the people who are actually reachable by phone consistently over time, and an engine that doesn't need you to hire a small army of 10 to 20 reps, but maybe just 1 or 2. And any final parting thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I think the biggest piece is to make sure that you're not outsourcing the most important piece of this in the first place, which is the list. Everybody's going to look at this and say, well, can I get somebody else to do this? Especially the first 1,000 target accounts that you want to be doing business with in the future. if you take the time now to build that list and it's right, you're going to be in a position where now everything else that you're doing is optimizing for the right things at the right time versus constantly trying to figure out information from false negatives or even false positives that come by shortcutting that piece.
Mm.
At the end of the day, the companies that we're trying to get into are our future customers. And if you do anything right out of this entire process, is take the time up front to ensure that these are indeed companies that look like a fish or quack like a duck, whatever that look is, right? Take the time to do that, and it's going to serve you really, really well over time. If you're very, very new to this, which most people that are watching this are, you might not know. And so it's okay to shortcut it, but just realize that the expectations for results tomorrow are not going to be there if you don't know, right? If you don't know, it's a learning experience. But if you have a really strong signal that you know these are the types of companies, the time spent identifying the exact companies up front is going to go a long way.
And if you need help with any of this, that's what we do at the Outbound Operators. As always, I'm Ronen Pessar. With me is Ryan Reisert. We're the Outbound Operators. Hope you enjoyed this special edition where we did a full deep dive into a very key process. Part of what we deploy is this outbound engine. This is basically the outline of it. If you enjoyed or hated this episode, let us know in the notes below. Otherwise, stay tuned as we return to our regularly unplanned and unscheduled content that we release every day after this. Alrighty, sayonara. Till next time.
Peace.